Perfect. Well, thank you all for joining us for this first talk of our 4-part summer series, Collective Liberation. The series is brought to you by American Friends of Combatants for Peace and our parent organization, Combatants for Peace in Israel and Palestine. I am Tiffany Goodwin Van Camp. I'm the Executive Director of American Friends, and I want to introduce you to my colleagues, Laura Morris, the Director of Development in Israel for Combatants for Peace, and Lindsay Bennett, the Marketing and Communications Manager and Development Manager for American Friends. We created this series to help our community explore the intersectionality of systemic oppression in Palestine and Israel and around the globe, and the intersectionality of how we get free together. Our series is rooted in the traditions of the civil rights movement, in which leaders asserted that nobody is free until everybody is free, and that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, and that when we help each other get free, we free ourselves. So today's topic is Israeli and Palestinian Solidarity, and we are honored to have our speakers, Mickey Gitzin, the Director of New Israel Fund, and Nivine, Sandouka, the Regional Chief of Staff for the Alliance for Middle East Peace, and the Executive Director of a new NGO in Jerusalem called Our Rights. Moderating for us today is Gilly Getz. Besides being an amazing Israeli-American artist, activist, he recently produced the film Israelism, and he is the board president of my board, American Friends of Combatants for Peace. Some quick housekeeping. This talk is being recorded, so we will email it out to you after our time together. And also, we will be taking audience questions toward the end of the talk. You can send your questions to the profiles, the profiles of the people that say send questions here. Forgot to introduce Caitlin. She's our intern. She's one of our send questions here people. So you can send questions to her, and you can send questions to Lindsay. And with that, I would like to hand things over to Gili, who will lead us.
Thank you so much, Tiffany, and everybody on the call for joining in these really difficult times, and joining hopefully the rest of our series where we explore how no one's free until all of us are free. I'd just like to ground us in this moment for 1 second. These are extremely difficult times in Israel-Palestine. We are watching with great alarm and concern developments on the ground, constant communication with Israeli and Palestinian friends and family, and we glued to the TV following the news. This week, the Israeli government, composed of criminals, Jewish supremacists, and theocrats, has moved one step closer to establishing authoritarian rule by weakening the only substantive power on the Israeli government, the high court system. Despite mass historic and truly inspiring protests of Israeli Jews on the streets of Israel for almost 6 months, warnings from leading security and economic experts that such move will harm the country, the government voted to limit the high court's ability to challenge the government in decisions by its ministers, opening the door to mass systemic corruption, and one step closer to firing the attorney general and replacing her with a yes person that can end Bibi's ongoing corruption trial, among many other things, and advance the government's plan to eliminate the court and establish authoritarian rule. Various petitions were filed to the Supreme Court challenging the constitutionality, even though there is no constitution, of this law, and we will learn a little bit more about how that plan is looking like. Of course, authoritarian rule already exists for Palestinians living under the brutality of the Israeli occupation. We watch in horror at the very same Jewish supremacist leaders pushing for eliminating the courts, are also accelerating a violent annexation process and deepening the occupation and apartheid systems by massively expanding illegal settlements, systemic land theft, and building illegal outposts, advancing mass expulsions like in Masafriata, and home demolitions all over Area C of the West Bank, while also applying state and settler violence and harassment with impunity, including pogroms, cruel and efficient bureaucracies designed for Israeli settlement growth, while demolishing Palestinian homes, infrastructure, schools. We also see increase in evictions of Palestinians from their homes by settler organizations using racist laws, an example of East Jerusalem, in neighborhoods like Sheikh Jarrah and Silwan. We see increase in military invasions, Palestinian casualties, including children, killed with absolutely no accountability, including Palestinians who are American citizens. The system of Jewish supremacy under occupation and apartheid has produced, cultivated, and developed the very politics and political leaders now robbing Israelis of their freedom and destroying the Israeli democratic structures, making even clearer the profound truth that there is no such thing as democracy with occupation, that as long as Palestinians live under the brutal system of oppression, no one will be free, no one will be saved. And we must fight for human rights for all, from the river to the sea, as one of our slogans of our movement states. We are so deeply grateful to have with us today two extraordinary human rights leaders to help us make sense of this moment, its challenges and its opportunities, and give us some insight into the partnership of solidarity between Israelis and Palestinians fighting for human rights, equality, and democracy. So thank you so much for being with us. Nivine, maybe I can start with you. Maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and where this moment finds you. You know, how do you process what is going on with this government and its authoritarian processes?
Thank you very much for that introduction, Gilly, and thank you for having me here today. And of course, it feels very dangerous and very scary these days. Sorry, the kids' neighbors are screaming. I just need to close the window. I'll be back just 1 second. Sorry for that. So as I was saying, I think for me as a Palestinian, and this is, I share it, I think, with most of the other Palestinians and colleagues that I talk to, we actually feel very scared because we know that it is first and foremost the Palestinians who will be paying the price for having this government in place and these laws in place as well. So, for example, if you look at even, I mean, you mentioned everything that has been happening so far, but if you also look at the number of casualties, we're talking about 156 Palestinians killed already since the beginning of this year, compared to 2022, when we not only, of course, it's also number of casualties, but throughout the whole year, it was 204 casualties. So we see an increased number of deaths, and there's definitely also a killing without even going to a court system. There's increased evictions, and we are witnessing one right now in the old city of Jerusalem, like the family of Sublaban. And even though there has been many demonstrations and peaceful protests against it, nobody is listening and nobody is doing anything about it. If you look at what happened in Hawara and in Turmus'aya, with more and more settlers actually attacking Palestinian villages in the West Bank, this is also something else. But the thing is, for us as Palestinians, is that we have always been, shouting out to the world that this is happening, that this is what we are dealing with. And unfortunately, 56 years of us trying to explain what occupation is all about and what these settler groups are, nobody actually was listening to us. And now it's actually home. And that only confirms this saying that nobody is free until everybody is free. And the scary thing that's also going to happen in the future is also affecting the Israeli establishment and the Palestinians, the Israeli security establishment, and Israel as well. Because if you have been following the news, Ben Gvir has constantly been calling for the establishment of militias, private militias that are going to hold weapons in the West Bank, and they're going to operate in the West Bank. That means that the formal IDF is no longer there. And it means that, not that they should be there anyway, if you're talking about ending the occupation, but at least they are formal army. Now we're talking about militias and citizens and civilians. And that actually takes us to a totally different level of confrontation. If you're looking at the Palestinian general public as well, and especially the young people these days in Palestine, they are becoming increasingly hopeless. They are becoming increasingly visionless, if I might call it. They don't have a vision for any future. And the number of people who are actually supporting a one state is increasing. And so basically we're also saying no hope for the two-state solution anymore. And these young people, the frustrated young people right now in Palestine, if you talk to them, they are not bound to the economic ties or like to paying loans or anything else. And they don't really understand the whole politics and the history of the Palestinian Liberation Organization and the Palestinian Authority and Oslo Accords and everything else. They didn't witness any of all of that. So they just want to know that they can live and they want to live a normal life. And right now, for them, the normal life, the only way to get a normal life is actually through becoming more radicalized, because they feel this is the only way they can actually fight back and regain their rights. So we are unfortunately looking at a very dim future. And what happens is in Israel right now, definitely the people who will pay the highest price are the Palestinians in the West Bank and in Gaza and East Jerusalem, as well as the Palestinians within Israeli citizenship.
Thank you so much for this, Nivine. Miki, if you can give us a sense of this moment, how do you process it? How do you see the Israeli society processes a moment that is unprecedented in the Israeli collective psyche, and from your perspective of human rights work, obviously a unique perspective on this.
So first of all, thank you. I really want to appreciate the fact for you having me here, and of course, our audience who are watching. It's an extraordinary moment. I think that we were not fully aware when we scheduled this meeting that it would be in such a historic moment, and in many ways, it's a very confusing moment. From one hand, we're looking at the most radical, right-wing radical government we've ever seen. That it's not only about talking radically or being racist as we've been witnessing for many years. We're seeing a level of action we haven't seen for a very long time, both internally within the Israeli 48 borders and when you look at the West Bank, the reality on the ground is actually deteriorating. On the other hand, I want to be able to bring here a positive message, because I think that what we're witnessing in this moment is a moment of awakening. I think that for many Israeli Jews mainly, it was very easy to be kind of like in between, to try to be apolitical, to try to find the common denominator of the Israeli center. And I think that things do come clearer. I think that people are in a moment that they need to kind of like take sides. So it's not going to be, an immediate change in political discourse, but things that people say today, the connections that people make between the ongoing occupation, the reality, the judicial reform, the issues to do with equality for Palestinian citizens of Israel, and so on, are becoming more clear to a growing group of Israelis. I think in times where, things looked as if are somehow okay in the Israeli context, people felt that it could go forever. But we, at the New Israel Fund and our colleagues in the human rights community, have been actually talking about this, what we call the democratic recession. But now we're not in the moment of democratic recession, meaning it's not slowly changing and deteriorating. Actually, these extreme moments that make everything much more clearer to the public are extremely needed if you look at things in the Israeli context, but also if you look at it in international context. When things are bright, clear, and open, people just need to make choice. And I think that the fact that so many Israelis have been taking the streets in the way they did, speaking the language of equality and democracy, although we don't share exactly the definition of what equality means and what democracy means, but I think that this kind of language doesn't mean a direction. And the other thing that I wanna share with our audience is what is happening in the what we call the anti-occupation space. During this time of protest, the growing number of people who are joining what we call the anti-occupation bloc within the system of the protest is something that we've never witnessed in this space for very, very long time. I'm understanding today, after being in this space for quite a long time, that we were basically blocked from every open discussion space in the Israeli realm of open civil society or civil discussion. And this new reality, this new city, like, town hall meeting kind of a concept where you actually can meet people and you can talk to people, or can hand people flyers and show your agenda is new, and it's opening eyes of many people that were not in the state of mind in which we are been for very, very long time. So from one hand, we're seeing very extreme moment, and that's a true reality. This is the most extreme right-wing government we've ever seen in the history of the state of Israel, which is not only talking but actually doing. The actions are being held on the ground. On the other hand, the backlash, the rise of a new political movement in Israel is a great opportunity for us if we take it and work smartly in order to engage these people. And despite the differences, they see them as partners of ours in the long-term journey towards democracy.
Thank you so much, Mickey. I'm wearing the shirt of the looking occupation in the eye, which is the most prominent slogans around the anti-occupation bloc, and I've been there, and it's truly extraordinary to see. And we know now there are Palestinian speakers in the anti-occupation bloc, and calling for joint struggle. And I'd like to ask you a little bit about the challenges and opportunities of this moment, about joint struggle that is, has to be innovated and to some extent invented because of the kind of segregations of the societies and the politics. So Miki, if I could just ask you to touch on that, but before that, the protest movement made an effort, and this is the tension with the anti-occupation bloc, to decouple the occupation and Palestinian rights from this coup. There's been an argument inside the protest movement about what space should the occupation and Palestinian rights take it. Hence the slogan: "There is no democracy for the occupation." You cannot fight for democracy while brutally oppressing millions of people. So my question to you is: that space in Israeli consciousness opening up? Are people seeing more of the connections, or those that see the connections end up being more vocal and more present and feel more emboldened to take this position publicly? And then if you can touch on joint organizing or joint struggle as you see it.
So, the answer here is always, it's complicated, because on one hand, the space for the bloc, the space for the anti-occupation bloc is being much more visible and broadening itself. And I think that if in the past such block would have been part of any protest movement, it would have been pushed away and would be silent by the majority of people. And we're actually seeing it growing in places and cities, not only in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem and the large cities, also in towns and cities that we would never expect to see the anti-occupation bloc. The anti-occupation bloc is growing. Are these people who would always support the anti-occupation messages and just came out, publicly as supporters of the bloc? It could be, but I think that the fact that people find themselves quite, I would say, quite comfortably with these messages within the Israeli context is something that we need to take very seriously and to work in order to increase that. I also feel that people were changing. Even just yesterday, where were you in Hawara? Hawara is the Palestinian village that underwent a pogrom by settlers, and the police was not there to protect them. And it's for the second time when there are clashes between police officers and demonstrators, both in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. They choose, those are not people of the anti-occupation bloc, to chant and to scream and to cry, where were you in Hawara? Meaning, how come the police is here violently against us peaceful protesters and not protecting Palestinians' life? So our job is not to see only, our job is to find the cracks. Our job is to try to find spaces in which we can this message. And I could have gone and talked a lot about the challenges and the problems with the main protest movement and so on. But actually, I want to present here a different face of this reality. Our job is to actually increase our voice, find partners, and cry our message, and do it wherever we can. That's why we believe in change, and the ability to create change is needed in order to do human rights work. And that's also connected to the joint struggle question. It's probably the most difficult time to do a joint struggle, both politically and socially. And societies are not open for it as much as we would want them to be open for it. The occupation is ugly, the disconnect is so clear, the anti-normalization movement is very powerful, and there is no space for joint work. And I think that carrying this flag of joint struggle is a complicated thing to do, and there is a lot of work that needs to be done also, not only in the joint work, but also nationally in both sides, both in the Israeli and Palestinian sides. But I think as much the same here as I think about the general struggle. With the fact that it's difficult doesn't mean it's impossible, and if it's not impossible, we must carry on and do it. Because if we drop it, if we drop the need for a joint struggle, if we drop the understanding that the communication between people who share values but also share strategies, it's very easy to drop it. But it's the moment we do it, it will be even harder to bring it up to speed to work together. So I don't have a very positive message on that one because it's very difficult. But I think that every action or every organization, definitely like Combatants for Peace and others, keep this joint work is something that is very, very needed in space that is going actually the other way around.
Thank you so much, Mickey and Nivine. If you can touch on, from your perspective, it's the people leading this coup are the same exact people who have been brutalized Palestinians and are kind of a product of that base system. And now it's turning on Israeli Jews. From this moment, how do you see the potential possibility and definitely the challenges? I know they're enormous, of joint work, given the imbalance of power, given that Palestinians have to deal with so much. Maybe some thoughts about when Palestinians see the Palestinian flag in the anti-occupation bloc, when they see the work. I know of Free Jerusalem doing great work, standing together. I mean, there are examples of joint work, innovating in that space. If we can have your insights into in the context of this moment and looking forward about such work.
So if I may just first of all just say a couple of things about the things that we just heard from Mike, if I may. So I also talked to many of my Israeli friends who reside in Tel Aviv, who are entrepreneurs, who who actually see a partner with the Palestinians. And when I talk to them about what is happening and whether they stand and if there is hope or not, they always, like, at least 3 of them already told me that they're planning to leave Israel. And I found myself a Palestinian who has been fighting for my whole life against occupation so far, telling them, don't leave, we need you. So it's kind of like that contradictory place as a Palestinian where you find yourself in, that don't leave because you're the ones basically that you understand right now what is happening, and you're the ones who are actually going to protect us as Palestinians from your own systems that exist. And it's quite, I don't know, it's a weird schizophrenic situation that Palestinians find themselves in. If another incident that just happened is that me and my colleague, we needed to take the train 2 days ago when there were a big demonstration in Jerusalem, from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. We ended up in a train surrounded by Israeli flags and all these people going to the demonstration, and we're in the middle of it, talking Arabic and sometimes speaking in English so that people don't feel afraid, they don't understand what we are talking about. I could understand a little bit of the conversation, for example. So they were talking that we allowed this to happen as Israelis, seculars. We allowed this to happen since the 70s because we allowed, life in Israel to be shut down on a Shabbat. We allowed them to reach where they are today. And this internal discussion was going on, and I'm listening very curiously. And then they asked, where are you from? And I said, like, I'm Palestinian from Jerusalem. And the reaction was amazing. I couldn't believe the reaction because they were very welcoming, actually. And my friend is from Hebron, so it was also very welcoming for her. And we started this conversation, whether they have hope or not. And I asked this very same question that you asked Mike a while ago, is like, do you believe that, there's a link between democracy and what's happening in the West Bank and occupation? And all of them said, yes, there is. There is a link and we see it. But we don't want to talk about it now. Now it's like, kind of like, let's focus on this. But we do understand that we need afterwards to talk about this issue that is happening in the West Bank. The schizophrenia is that one guy was talking about his daughter who serves in the IDF in Hebron, apparently in the old city of Hebron, where the situation over there is crazy. And he was just saying and concerned that his daughter is serving when she doesn't have many colleagues around her. So he wants to add more soldiers in Hebron to protect his daughter. And this is exactly where it strikes me. Like, you're talking about democracy and you're seeing what these settlers are actually doing, and you're fighting with them basically. But at the same time, you want more soldiers in the West Bank. Like, this still doesn't click from my mind. And then they started talking in Hebrew again. I guess they didn't understand that I knew Hebrew. And they were like, we hope this works and we hope nothing security incident happens. And they were looking at us, like we are, again, the terrorists, the Palestinian suspects who want to blow up a train. So it's, or like Iran or Lebanon. And that's obviously something to be taken into consideration. But again, in the Israeli psychology, this is what I felt as a Palestinian, that you're still hijacked in this security mentality that, okay, yes, we want our democracy, but it's not about occupation, it's about protecting, and about a joint struggle or not with everything that has been happening. I think it's really important to also look at the internal Palestinian issues that are happening as well, remembering that the Palestinians also live under our own regime, under our own Palestinian Authority. We didn't have elections since 2006. And right now we are also witnessing a lot of internal human rights issues as well within the Palestinian Authority. So as a Palestinian, we're looking at this, we do feel detached. total detachment from what is happening in Israel and what's happening in the West Bank or Jerusalem. It's like it has been happening for 56 years. So why should we join your struggle? But when we see, I'm not sure how many Palestinians even make that link when they see the Palestinian flag inside the demonstrations. I mean, I talk to many Palestinians about this, and I think Palestinians just see this as something that doesn't really concern them. It's something that's only for the Israelis. And even when they see the flag, I think they think it is Palestinians with an Israeli citizenship mostly that hold this flag, when it is actually Israelis who is the anti-occupation bloc, and most of them are our members that we support as well. So it's still the Palestinians don't make that link. It's really interesting. Yesterday, for example, I was talking to some Israelis, and one Israeli friend, actually from the audience, told me, you know, we can, as Israelis, we can raise your flag in the demonstrations, but you, as a Palestinian, if you came to the demonstrations and held the flag, the police will attack you. So I was like, yeah, so I don't know, should I join this struggle or not? Because I'm a Palestinian, I'm still an easy target for the police. But I feel the connection. But then there's all these question marks about, is there really a link? And am I an easy target for the police or not? And am I going to be protected or not if I join these demonstrations?
Thank you so much, Nivine. And it's striking to me that Israelis are taking extraordinary actions of civil disobedience, mass protests, and strikes. Something the Palestinians have been doing for a very long time. We see the different reactions of the authorities because the difference between how police deals with Jewish Israeli protests versus Palestinian protests. The even citizens of Israel, the differences are stark. But we do see, and Miki, maybe you can address that. We do see an increase in police violence. We see the police. We know the police is run by a terror supporter, convicted criminal supremacist Itamar Ben-Gvir. We know that he's pressuring police to use more violence against the protest movement. We see an escalation from civil society and human rights. What do we expect to see in the coming weeks and months on that front? Are there any ways to confront that? As we know, a police chief was removed because he wasn't willing to use the type of violence they use on Palestinians regularly. He was now willing to use on Israeli Jewish citizens. So just your take on the increased brutality of the police against the protest movement that seems to increase.
Yeah, so the situation is bad enough so we can put it in context. I think that the police is still run by the chief of the police, and definitely there are tries on the side of Ben-Gvir to push the police for more brutality. But I think that we at the Newsroll Fund have been running a program which was called and is still called Freedom of Protest for the last 10 years, where when we saw significant chilling effect among activists when it came to anti-occupation activists and activists in the space of underprivileged communities and so on. And we've been definitely Palestinian citizens of Israel as well, and we've seen we encountered this kind of violence against demonstrators for quite a long time. The new thing is actually that things that were exercised against these minority communities are starting to get or touch more kind of like what they call mainstream Israelis who live in larger cities within Israel. But the practices and the level, the way the police works, at least for us, it's nothing new. And we've been following it for quite a long time, and I would like us and encourage us to take it into context, right, which is extremely important in this matter. At the same time, at NAF, we've I told you about the Freedom of Protest program that we run, but when these kind of protests have started, we realized that one of the things that regimes like that do when extreme measures come from protesters or from protest movement, they try to crack down the protest movement. That's what they were doing, and we're seeing it happening, by the way, going against civil society, against protesters, against certain people who speak up. And we try to tackle it both with providing lawyers to those who are being arrested, providing information and data about how you should handle reality like this. What do you have to tell people? What you don't have to tell the people? The issue of Palestinian flag and people arrested with the Palestinian flag was a major issue that the Association for Civil Rights in Israel took ACRI and Human Rights Defenders Funds, both organizations that we support. So I think that from one end, let's put it into context. The reality for Israeli Jews is not even close to what Palestinians or even other underprivileged communities like the Ethiopian community and so on have seen through history. B, we are seeing increased violence, and we're going to see it not only with the actions of the police, the government or organizations that are associated with the government will increase the level of attacks and terror against those who try to oppose the current government, definitely if they're successful. And C, there are actions and there are plans and programs coming from civil society that, at least within the context of the current moment, still know how to handle this level of violence. I think that one of the things we'll definitely see is higher tensions between police, government, and also the legal system that's still trying to kind of find a middle ground between those two elements, police and government. Yeah, but it's an interesting thing, it's from one end it's very sad. On the other hand, the awakening, as I said before, the awakening moment for so many Israelis to see things that we've been seeing for so long, something we never wished for. But now I think people are getting into some sort of a proportion about how things could go for other people. They don't always do the connections, but that's our job to make the connection for them.
Thank you, Miki. Yeah, the connection of the to connect the two for average Israelis, connect the two things are very important. So I encourage everybody to send questions our way. Anything you want to know, I'm just gonna ask kind of last questions on our list, and then go to your questions. Let me just answer the first one, because it's about the ability to influence, to reach the Jewish community here in America, in Europe, of the anti-occupation bloc. I'm part of the anti-occupation bloc here in New York. We have done a lot of work trying to reach out to American Jews and the broader community to educate about the connection, the deep connection between the occupation and what's happening right now. So the last question, before we go to folks, I know it's a difficult one, but it's obligatory. We ask it: what would you like to see the international community do at this moment? What should be the posture of the international community? I know Biden was outspoken against the coup, but didn't really articulate any concrete actions. From your perspective, Nivine, what would you like to see the international community do at this moment?
Yeah, it is a difficult question to answer, but I'll try to kind of answer it. So first of all, knowing that the international community is stuck, if I might use that word, in the two-state solution. And I think right now the international community should actually be looking at alternative solutions to what is happening here. It might be that the two-state solution is no longer viable, and young people on both sides are no longer believing in that. So it's better to be proactive and ready for whatever scenario is going to happen, and kind of like for the international community to step in. This is the moment for them to step in. We know that the Palestinian-Israeli conflict hasn't been on the radar for a while, and now it's coming back, especially with everything that has been happening in Israel. Especially also with the radicalization on both sides and the young people in Israel and in Palestine increasingly saying that they demand a one state. In Israel, the young people say one state with no equal rights. So anyway, something that the international community should be alert that it might be too late for the two-state solution and they should already consider alternatives. The other most important thing, which I think is also related to the international humanitarian law, is the protection of civilians. We know with the establishment of these militias, Benguir militias, we do need the international presence to offer international protection of civilians for both, and I guess now with the increased violence against Israeli civilians as well, we should actually have some kind of presence to protect the civilians on both sides, but mostly the Palestinian side. So that's two things that they should actually start considering. A third thing is that this government is or might be considering a law to put more taxations on civil society organizations that work on peace building. And they should definitely put pressure because that means the governmental money, taxpayers' money that is going to peace building is actually going to be taxed by this government. And this is something that the international community should be alert of, and they should put pressure on Israel about as well, and to follow up this issue as well. And at AllMap, we are definitely doing a lot of follow-up on that issue of taxation to civil society organizations. So these are the three big things that I think like a government level we can do. The other thing is basically at the local level or the level of people, stay informed and participate in activities, put pressure on your elected, you are a democracy, put pressure on your elected, representatives that this situation is not bearable. You should be considering ways to put pressure on this government to not only prevent what is happening in Israel, but also consider what is happening to the Palestinians for the past 56 years. And now it's infiltrating to the Israeli society as well. So these would be my asks from the international community.
Thank you so much, Nivine. Miki, can you comment on what should the international community do? And I'll add to that, just the former American ambassadors to Israel have called for looking for the first time, busting this Washington taboo about the military aid to Israel, questioning that from a very pro-Israel perspective about the benefits of keeping up this level of assistance, given the circumstances. I just want to process how that lands in Israeli society. And the last, I'll tackle that on too, make your life a little harder. How somebody asked about the Ashkenazi Mizrahi aspects of the protest movement. It's portrayed as Mizrahim are left out. They're not part of this movement. This is an elite, educated, affluent, privileged movement. So that perception of it and the military reservists who refuse, unheard of in Israeli mainstream discourse, refuse to, according to the news today, to show up for reserve training or officially remove themselves from the units. Any one of those, I know it's a lot, but there's a lot coming our way with questions.
I'll start with the international community. I think that clear voice coming from the international community are very important these days. I have to say at the same time, I have very low expectations from the international community when it comes to our region. The political the political forces around us were never proactively working on the issue to benefit peace and peace building, and I think that we see it very clearly now. I think that we should keep on working, keep on trying to find a path. But as opposed to many of my colleagues, I have very low expectations in this field. I have to admit. There was a time that many of us thought that the international community would step up and act and so on. And you know, I'm always happy to work with partners, but I don't build. I think that a lot of the work on the ground with our people could be in some ways more important. And adding to it, I think that the international community is much easy from the Israeli perspective, right? It's much easier to engage the international community when they feel that there is significant voice within the Israeli community itself, without having any Israeli backing to our voice, which could happen and develop through these times. The tectonic shifts within the society are something to be looking as at least as much as the international aspect of them. When it comes to the Ashkenazi Mizrahi issue, let's be honest, liberals around the world um, became much more connected to, as opposed to the working class kind of like politics of the past. We are seeing a significant problem among progressives and liberals who are much more connected to the more educated, higher class people, and we see it here as well. It's a true thing, but I think that um, I've seen, at least among my friends, middle class Mizrahi community who hasn't been involved in the past as much as many of the other people who were so apoliticals are joining more than in the past. Of course, the clear divide between right-wing Mizrahi from the periphery and the Ashkenazi liberal elite who live in the large cities still very much powerful within the Israeli political discourse, and I think it's a major challenge for us, but it's a major challenge for progressives around the world. It's not an Israeli specific thing. I think it's also true with in many ways within the American political case. Um, what was the last point that
The reservists,
that I said?
the
Um,
reservists, the
Listen,
incredible.
that's something that if you asked me about it like 6 months ago, I would never believe that any of the reservists of any kind in the Israeli context would use their reserve power to influence politics. It's unheard of, and I think it should be. Although again, they don't go all the way where we are, but the fact that they're using the strategy is something that we need to encourage and to think very highly of. Those people, a lot of their identities or how they see themselves and how they perceive themselves, socially, is connected to their reserve duty and their reserve actions, and one can be cynical to it, but on the other hand, I would encourage us to take it very respectfully, and understand that that's a major change within the Israeli center left. Um, and I want to also warn us, right? It could, it could have implications also in the future. What will happen, or what happens, if right-wing reservists need to, for example, evacuate settlers, or questions like that. It's basically showing the new reality within Israeli society that is actually turned to at least two parts. Who I'm very, very concerned will have a hard time to keep living together.
Uh, Thank you, Vicky. The question from Nivine is what can be done to help improve conditions of the Palestinians in the meantime? What actions could be taken to better the lives of Palestinians at this moment?
So, well, if you look at generally the politics, what has been happening is that even though we see increased settlements and even illegal outposts being rehabilitated again, and also, the settler violence and everything else, there has been a kind of a trying to talk between the Palestinian Authority led by Mahmoud Abbas and Netanyahu. There has been rumor, at least within the Palestinian society, that what happened in Jenin was kind of coordinated together. So there has been at that level some sort of weird coordination happening, but at the same time, the Palestinian people on the ground are paying the price. And the one thing that I can imagine what can happen is actually the international presence that I was talking about, because the international presence offers some kind of protection for the Palestinian people, especially in the most marginalized areas like Masafer Yatta, Area C, Silwan, Sheikh Jarrah, Old City of Jerusalem. These are the places where you need to have some kind of international presence, whether they are even observers, nothing else. The presence itself actually offers protection for the Palestinians, and that's the first thing that we actually need to take into consideration. The other thing is we can look at the level of what is happening in a sense of home demolitions, in a sense of water rights, in a sense of displacement. So basically, this is where you can actually, as audience here, and also as an international community, can start lobbying your elected representatives, can write policy papers about it, and also can basically keep yourself informed and do whatever you can do to make sure that you're putting that level of pressure. If somebody says the Palestinian people need money and aid, I think from a Palestinian perspective, and I'm a Palestinian, the last thing we need is aid. What we need is protection and accessibility to our resources, as well as
Thank you, Nivine. The last part was choppy, but you need access to the Palestinians need access to the resources, freedom of movement.
Yes, and what the last thing was that they need to live under security as well. Like, we need security too. This is the thing that we as Palestinians need these days. We don't need to be afraid that we are while sleeping in cities like, or towns or villages like Hawara and Turmus Aya, to find settlers and to find our homes on fire suddenly, and find ourselves the next victim. One would be.
Thank you. And we also see increased violence against journalists, Palestinian journalists that are arrested and harassed for documenting the reality on the occupation and Palestinian Palestinian security. Miki, so we have 2 more minutes left. I have a question. I don't know if you have time to answer it. Maybe just end with your thoughts. But the question is, is it true that if we support the Israeli opposition, we also are against the occupation? It's a complicated question from somebody sitting here. If we support the opposition, opposition leaders and such, that means we also oppose the occupation? And so you have 2 minutes.
I'll say very, unfortunately, not necessarily. I think that there is a potential here to create a clear connection between the anti-occupation movement and the pro-democracy movement. And I would, if I would need to support anyone, I would ask, does, the person or the organization that I support actually mark the two, support democracy and support anti-occupation work? Only organizations that support the two are relevant for the moment, because you cannot necessarily, think of one because it does pro-democracy work, you support the anti-occupation work. Those are not always interconnected when it comes to the Israeli political reality, unfortunately.
Thank you so much. And before I throw it back to Tiffany, thank you so much for everybody who came. We have tons of questions we didn't get to, especially on two-state solution. There's a confederation model. Somebody asked other alternatives. Thank you so much for your interest and your questions. in following CFP, the Combatants for Peace and American Friends of Combatants for Peace. I'm going to throw it to Tiffany. Thank you so much. And Nivine and Mickey, so deeply admire you and your work. And we really appreciate you being here with us. Thank you so much for all you do. Tiffany.
Thank you, Nivine. Thank you, Mickey. Thank you, Keely. And thank you to all of our allies and supporters who joined us today. A few things in closing. One, we will send you this recording, and one way that you can help out is simply by sharing it with those in your community. So you'll be able to share the link. I also want to share that our virtual talks are free. We just launched these to be a part of a formal program called Collective Ed. And while they are free and you get free resources and education, we also ask that you give as you get. So this summer, we are doing a fundraiser specifically for our youth emerging activist education programs in Israel and Palestine. And these are our freedom schools, our youth groups, and all of our youth programs. So anything that you give through this series will go directly to the students and the youth in Israel and Palestine. And so we ask you to give. We're actually trying to raise $40,000 this summer. And we have currently a match commitment of $15,000 for the first $15,000 we raise. So you can double your gift by giving today or giving following this talk. Our next talk in the series is August 3rd. We'll be sending you an email so you can sign up for that. And again, everyone, thank you so much for joining us and being a part of this work and being a part of a much needed community, joint community, collective community, and a much needed solution. Everyone take care.